Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Ubud, Bali. Sunday, June 25th, 2023. This is the World Dharma Public Forum. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for the people who are here. I've been anticipating this opening sharing now since last week. Someone wrote in and asked if I would speak about the more personal ways that I inhabit / practice / live what I term as my Dhamma, the lawfulness of my creative expression, interior, exterior, in context. How do I live freedom? In other words, Dhamma to me is the operative word for finding liberation through living, and the oxygen of that process is an ongoing breathing into how I feel. That's a very operative set of words, how I feel, and I use the word here, the panya, or the wisdom of freedom. And so today is the how do I live freedom? How do I oxygenate liberation as an intrinsic process to consciousness, the knowing of phenomenology that I experience, that you experience at the six sense doors, and the inner door of knowing the phenomena, and equally an increased, what I would call, mindful intelligent awareness of the psyche, the subconscious, and even deeper or more expansive, the substratum, the trans effervescence, the radiance of interiority, or the radiance of consciousness beyond knowing truly what's there. So it's the psychic expansion, or the radiance of consciousness, including that field. And the deeper DNA and the pre-DNA, if you will, of beingness. This is where the word Dhamma expands into the word, for me, of the holy, or divinity, or something beyond even the word sacred. There's a little bit too much applause and positivity in the word sacred. And although I do believe in wonderment and awe and miracles and magic and all those kind of cool things, you know, as a very intimate, I would call it, for lack of better terms, a son of Buddha, a disciple of awakening, not a disciple of a man, a disciple of awakening. That awakening to me is the vocation of being human in the context of what the Buddha called samsara. Stay with me. How do you go about this process of oxygenating what I call my freedom in context to self and other, and the principles that I'm most loyal to, decency, unity, cooperation, inclusivity, non-discrimination, call it the authenticating of my integrity to the stature of my dignity, that level of loyalty to the marrow and the pineal gland, if you will, combined, of what I call my core identity. Go further into the goddess, the god, the divine, trans goddess, trans god, the isness that we're embedded. Please include everything here. Ambient sound, internal feelings, images, we're in existence. So how do I go about, this was a very beautiful question for me, how do I go about living my Dhamma? I want to call it the artfulness of sanity And it's not an easy task to maintain or evolve sanity in truly a maddening context. But I want to be radically purposeful and intimate and truthful to myself on the personal ways that I go about living freedom, with loyalty to values and principles, and intrinsic to that is a loyalty to what I call my innate self-respect. Call it dignity, stature. And let me just pause here. So many of these words that I'm using, when I reflect in the immediate now, here and now with you, they become real to the extent that I cognitively embody the felt experiential coding, the musicality of the state of consciousness that I'm inhabiting. How well do I inhabit the cognitive formation, circuitry, the musicality, the aesthetics of a state of consciousness, an SOC, SOM, state of mind? And that is, okay, freedom is a state of consciousness. I've talked to so many political prisoners, and I'm honored to have their wisdom in some way associated with my learning from them, that although we were confined behind iron bars and often tortured, radically tortured, our freedom was not theirs to take. So it's a pointing to consciousness inhabiting freedom through the filter of panya, or wisdom. How do I inhabit freedom wisely? Call it skillfully. How do I inhabit? That's another word or a synonym for meditation in dynamic action and unity with interiority and exteriority simultaneously at the confluence of the senses. So that's number one for me in my life. How well do I inhabit on a felt experiential panya level of wisdom the oxygen of my dignity, freedom? How well do I understand freedom with inside of myself? Like, how well do I understand the words that I'm choosing to use right now? Bring it right home to the ever-present, often denied, camouflaged, obscured, ever-present phenomena of choice-making freedom. I've added a couple of words there. Choice-making freedom. Freedom isn't a static state, obviously. Oxygen isn't a static experience. We're in a dynamic flow of this near invisible quality. But if you take someone's freedom, take my capacity to enunciate language rightly within my conditioning, to take away my capacity to you hear sound without air, and you go, oh my God, that's freedom. The freedom to experience existence wisely. That's a key thing for me. And it's easy to see, if we pause here a third of the way through this sharing, we'll open it up to questions and further elaboration, how easy it is to obscure these words of freedom and dilute them with, how would I call them, obscurations and antonyms that are believed to be synonyms. And in fact, they're, in many ways, the freedom of being, of self-incarceration. And so another point here within this wisdom of freedom, the felt embodied of freedom, the felt embodiment of freedom, is understanding another quality for me, which is I would call it, I rarely use it, but I'm going to use it, radical discernment, critical thinking, deep inquiry, radical ethical self-doubt, and the willingness to inhabit what I don't know more wisely, giving myself the liberty to be more, free to discover something new, the innocence of spirit, right? Right there, just microdose, 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 every little moment of your life, microdose, 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 little moments of your life, microdose, and you will find mind manifesting more lucidity about what I don't see about myself more clearly. That fold of how I enslave, how I deny, how I deceive myself through the unrecognized mislanguaging of the phenomenology of a felt experience within consciousness. So right there, people ask me, how do you live your Dhamma? It's like, I don't know about you, but I love the sonic, vibrational, resonant, psychedelicized feeling of language, because a word is only what you make it, right? And freedom one day is not going to be freedom the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, to reimagine, to rewild these qualities of consciousness known as freedom and wisdom. That's another element of this is, looking at the ways that I mislabel core qualities of identity, looking how I can inhabit those core qualities more wisely, more authentically. Okay, pause right there. I would really recommend, if you're interested, which is just, again, sharing in a very personal way, the way that I do it, is I write down the words that I find most valuable to me that do describe or point to the qualities of consciousness that I wish to inhabit in the most, I would call it, intelligent, wise, authentic, dignified way. You know, having grown up as a young man and loved, like all of us probably, my crayons and chalks and my paints, and then growing up more to want to draw and to color and to emote interiority upon canvases and life, the artistry of life, the colors of consciousness, the felt vibrational frequencies and the colors of consciousness, the study of those. Another quality of how I inhabit freedom in my Dhamma is Dharma artistry, bringing Dharma artistry to how I inhabit the quality and oxygenate freedom. Right there, pause. Another quality is doing all that we can. This is such a crucial point, especially when we get involved in even just an inkling level with religions or philosophies or psychologies or communities. We fall easily into the trap of the cult of conformity and the circus of collusion. You know, we joyfully love the Third Reich, a sadistic dance to Hitler's massacre of the deplorables and the Jews. They didn't stop partying in Germany. People celebrate their stupidity, their ignorance, and their holocausts. And others suffer the most unthinkable, unspeakable, right? Suffering. So these aren't just words and colors and poetry here in shared space. These things have really deep meaning. Pause. I'm going to come to the end here soon and kind of go over some of the key points. Again, as an experiential Buddhist, not a Buddhist, but an experiential Buddhist, uniqueness and originality within your experience of what you imagine and you feel to be these teachings that have been handed down apparently through auditory speech, through behavioral patterns and formations within shared space, and eventually carved onto palm script and eventually on marble, and eventually ink on pages, and eventually all over the world in multiple languages on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, books attributed to the teachings of the Buddha called the Tripitaka. These teachings are not external. They are deeply internal. And they're understood, to state the obvious, but easily neglected, by how well do we inhabit the experiential literacy, the truth, and the wisdom of the state of mind. That, to me, is why I chose to become a monk and to undergo a period of training to learn to meditate, to learn to inhabit reality rightly. Reality here is the state of being a human. And what are the basic functions of being a human? There's consciousness, there's thought, there's images, there's emotions. There are conditions that are arising independent of my intention or vocation or even of my interest. Independently arising phenomena. I went, whoa, what an amazing thing to finally see in this life. I am not who I thought I was. The insight into conditioned phenomenology that you could not control, Alan. Even the thought about you, Alan, is arising and passing as a mosaic in a kaleidoscope of consciousness within the context of dimensionality and samsara. The Buddha attributed this insight, elementary as it was for me, to the word anatta. You cannot control phenomenology on the terms of your desire. And you go, oh my God. And so you go, oh my God. That is a very powerful insight for me in the way that I go about how do I inhabit freedom. The study of the conditions that bring to present time reality a deeper, more panoramic, dimensional expression of freedom in thought, speech, consciousness, and in action. Dimensionality of freedom. Skillfulness in the dimensionality of freedom. How well do I inhabit consciousness wisely to bring more freedom in a felt reality to myself and the world around me? Right there. Let me come to the end. The Buddha was said to have said in one simile attributed to the teachings found within the traditional Buddhist text, the Tipitaka, of a man who was shot by an arrow. And it said that the Buddha was there with the man and compassionately and quickly offered to remove that arrow and invited the man right on the spot to remove it himself. I will help you. Two things there, removing it yourself and the power. I'm going to close with this. The power, people ask me, how do I live the Dhamma? The power of a significant other. Cannot say enough about that for me in my life. The power of what the Buddha termed kalyanamitta, an individual, not a teacher, more than a teacher, more than a mentor, more than a friend, more than a best friend, less than a God, a being, a dynamic being, a kalyanamitta that sees you, sees so much of you, maybe not sees all of you, but sees so much of you that you go, whoa, and you have that recognition in the moment that man who's shot by the arrow. Now he's standing and dancing and the Buddha's there with him, and listen, there's a way beyond suffering. That arrow isn't just an arrow in your chest. It's anger, it's fear, it's judgment, it's limitation, it's contraction, it's false views. It's the bliss of an ignorant point of view called the Third Reich and brown shirts and all the things that we've seen that now are being exposed in the last 3 years of this planned pandemic. The distortions of freedom, the distortions of truth, the distortions of reality. And the Buddha said, no. It requires radical immediacy of you, Alan, to bring yourself to your own sense of presence. And I'm right there with you, a significant other in the self-radical responsibility of radical self-awakening. Right there, 2 things for the purpose of freedom. Freedom from suffering, it said. The Buddha said, I taught one thing and one thing only. The freedom from dukkha. The trauma, as it's been said, of everyday life. The trauma of rejection, the trauma of hurt, the trauma of inadequacy, the trauma of Holocaust, the trauma of stillborns, the trauma of extinctions, the trauma of genocide, the trauma of root canals, and the more sublime levels of disquietude. Even my sense of peace and joy and presence and stillness and happiness, it's a kaleidoscopic castle of infinite particles and conditions not in my control. I can influence, thus the power of the Dhamma, studying formations that influence the oxygenation of freedom within psyche and in contexts. And how do I diminish my association with contracting states of consciousness that fortify self-inspired, strangely, conflict. And right there, ask ourselves, how deeply do I want to understand the machinations of self-inflicted conflict? Free of the machinations of projections upon the canvas of infinity of why it happened. And this man who was shot with the arrow in this sutta of the Buddha, he said, no, I don't want to remove the arrow yet. I want to know who shot it. From where did it come, the wood and the feathers? Who carved the tip? Why did they shoot me? What an inappropriate action that was. There's so many ways to proliferate upon the so-called dukkha, but it seems to do almost nothing to relieve the immediacy of the felt phenomena of Vedana, or of pain in the moment, and all of a sudden here we are, in this moment right now. What will I do with the preciousness of my full breath? I'm right back to meditation, right back to the power of a Kalyanamitta, right back to the power of the Dhamma. The positive present phenomena, positive present phenomena. How well will I deal with this moment right here and now with the best, most dignified expression of my being? And I'm going to close here. I call it the power of going, of future forward. The power of future forward. And the collapse of conformity to structures that keep me in collusion to historical events that can never be resolved on the terms of their study. We will die. Let me close here with a personal story. When I disrobed as a monk, I was forced out of the country of Burma. And my teacher at that time, the Venerable Sayadaw U Pandita, he only said a few things to me as I was crying and the taxi was waiting to go to the airport. He said, "You know and trust that the seeds of purification are within you." Seeds of purification are innately within you, innately within you. That word innately, to me, when people ask about how do I practice Dhamma, how do I practice freedom, the study of political prisoners and the conscience and dignity, the soul of freedom, is how well do I occupy innate, what I would call innate paramis. Paramis are states of excellence, states of consciousness that are excellent when felt to be the nature of who you are. Yes, I've got flaws, I've got foibles, I've got struggles, I get complexities, I get enmeshed, I'm attached, I have attachment problems. But, and inclusive of all of that, I'm in the earth of my paramis. My innate environment, my innate topography is innately Dhamma. I'm a son of Buddha, awakening. Awakening to the reality of innate freedom, expanding into the luminosity of a co-conditioned, conditioning my way out of the conditions. Remember the word anatta. Learning to skillfully navigate conditions, to inhabit skillful conditions, to expand the radiance and the luminosity of freedom that includes even those epically courageous people who can look in the eyes of the enemy and say, "I know you know that you do not know what you do. I am so comfortable in my interiority, my security, and my Dhamma. I don't want to vilify you by vilifying me. You do what you do out of ignorance, as I do." Dhamma gives us that gift of immediate sense of stature and dignity, rooted in what my teacher was telling me as I left the monastery in Rangoon that day back in 1984. The seeds of purification are within you. The molecules of freedom are in every breath of your being. Inhabit them wisely, he said. It's awareness that nurtures. The word, you use the word nurture. Think of that, nurture. Nurture your wound, nurture your traumas, nurture your dukkha, nurture your love, nurture your self-awakening, nurture your friendships, nurture the best of you. He said, nurture everything in your being in thought, speech, and action, and abandon everything that's detrimental to your innate beauty. Bhavana. My teacher, my monk who ordained me, was named Usobana. Sobana is the Pali Buddhist word for beautiful states of consciousness. That is my heritage. That is the son and the daughter of the Buddha, not a man, but of awakening. We're in a radiant awakening to our innate beauty by dispelling the darkness. And all I can say here is how I live my Dhamma. Believe in love. Believe in magic. Believe in miracles. And keep lighting those candles of your own innate beauty and trust, occupy, elevate, radiate, expand into the innate radiance of that which is your own true being. The fabrications, the convulsions, the whirlpools, the waves, the tides, the crashes, the enmeshments, the entanglements, they're all there. However, we are the ocean of freedom. And it's right there where the word greatness, it's so difficult to use that word. But when we talk about authenticity, I keep hearing in myself the power of innate greatness, that I am a seed of enlightenment, right? I can awaken to the deepest, most powerful, most expansive states of consciousness ever known in the history of existence. Our hunt ship. Full radiant awakening, displacement of lobha, dosa, moha. Displacement. The flower does not curse the soil it grew from. Lobha, dosa, moha, I love you. Befriend every kilesa. Self-love. People ask, how do you live and inhabit the Dhamma? Radical self-love. The way that you drink water. The way that you rub your face with soap. The way you brush your teeth. The way you comb your hair. The way you touch. The way you allow being touched. The way you kiss. The way you sing, the way you cry, the way you walk, the way you dress, the way you move, the way you eat, what you buy, what you refuse to participate in. Love, anoint, elevate, co-create, expand into this miracle of your own self-love. And right there at that confluence of where I meets world, where anatta meets anatta, could we say enough about the power of self-compassion? We're forcibly embedded in a context of dimensionality beyond our control. Thank you, God. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Samsara. Thank you, colossal eternal embryo, for the gift of being a victim of this totality where madness is a very discernible proclivity. It doesn't take a lot of CNN and BBC to realize that Burma's undergoing a genocide of freedom right now. And my dear friend Aung San Suu Kyi is imprisoned and incarcerated based on lies, corporate lies, paraded around the world based upon collusion with Mr. Xi Jinping and Putin of Russia, who supplies the evil dictatorship of Burma with weapons and all the other things that go on with high-level global elitism called toxic, violent patriarchy and capitalism mixed together in the most satanic expressions, which is murder of your own people, even your own family. Who isn't family on this 8 billion person planet with gazillions of animals and trees and butterflies? Talk about an ecosystem of life. Where is the sacred of the way in which we live? So inhabiting this innate, radical self-love, to me, is the greatest sense of resilience and buoyancy that I can have, more than psychedelic-assisted, overcoming historical trauma, generational trauma, psychotherapy and neuroplastic rewiring of brain phenomenology and all the things. Drop the brain, come into the heart, and live in the radiance of this unexplainable, inarticulated beauty called your unique creative experience of embodied freedom. Freedom. Talk to a political prisoner. Read our books, Burma's Voices of Freedom. 4 volumes with my colleague Fergus Hart. Read their testimonies of what freedom means within the confinement of a prison cell being tortured. I'm not trying to compare and bring shame. Everyone's entitled to that relative understanding. But wow, break the conformity, Alan, of wounding and trauma and deficit, and I want to postpone my own awakening. By knowing who shot the arrow, Mom. Why did you do me in like that? When you can just live in the radiance of an unconditional nibbanification of phenomena. Another virtue of what I practice on a daily level now, which is more than mindfulness, but the radiance of mindful intelligence is nibbana. Complete cooling, the peacifying of my interiority. PPP at all costs. Prioritize personal peace is really another way of associating with this third noble truth of the Buddha's teaching, nibbana. The awakening of an unconditional resonant dance with phenomena. An awakening of an unconditional dance with phenomena. Nibbana here, now, and the wonderment and the awe of the possibility of breaking the contract of context called this samsara into the white hole of a new dimensionality. People ask about how I live my Dhamma. One of the things that I try to aspire to daily with my wish I could microdose more frequently than I do is breaking free of the confines of my conformity even to the Four Noble Truths. I want to inhabit them on ketamine, but I want to inhabit the fifth noble truth, which is radical transwonderment into a universe, galaxy, trans-superstring environment that does not have dukkha, the portal of Nibbana. The Buddha outlined as a doable way to live everyday life. Not some far-off thing in a cave or a monastery at the foot of a Rinpoche or of a Sayadaw. But here and now, the radiance of that, wow, how do I Nibbanify freedom? How do I liberate freedom through the trans filter of beginning to associate with the felt embodied wisdom of Nibbana as a lived form of inhabiting skillful thought, speech, and action more and more with unconditional skillfulness. It's not like unconditional, I don't care. It's like the less I inhabit with conditions, expectations, judgments, blame, those are conditions, attachments, gluing, the Velcro of consciousness, and even the slippery, I'm just free of all kinds of attachment. But the Nibbana, which is like face to face, skin to skin. Aha. Someone's looking at me, the Kalyanamitta. You rock, girl. I see you. Do we have the ability, this is something I ask myself a lot, do I have the ability to let myself be seen by a significant other? Or am I so, not busy, it's easy to say that, it's glib. Or am I so preoccupied, that's easy and that's even glib. Or am I just predisposed, is more like it, to an unrecognized conditioning of separation, distance. And I don't mean like a partition there or an apartheid. What I mean is you can't do it alone, Alan. Right back to Kalyanamitta, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Buddha, awakening, Dhamma, the lawfulness of reality. Study phenomenology and you will free yourself in the context of Sangha. Sangha is community, but this is not ordinary community. And it doesn't mean like lots of people either. It doesn't mean like a digital Sangha alone. Community here is like, how well do I inhabit the members of my interior world that I deny? My folds, my denial, my deceptions, my double, triple, quadruple life, right? That community too, the people that you've vilified, that you throw out of your Sangha, the people that you judge and condemn, right? All those people out there, all those radically awake, mindfully intelligent creatures of phenomenal psychedelic wisdom and enlightenment, all are who are radically woke and vaxxed. How did you do that? You're so attuned to wisdom, you rolled up your sleeve and took one for the Satan. No offense, I'm a satirist. And, wow, how do I inhabit Sangha in myself? And the wisdom and the beauty, I can't do it alone. And I love you. I want to learn from you. I want to inhabit elegant, something about boundary, I don't like the word. I want to inhabit elegant, co-resident respect. A very dynamic kind of trans-Tai Chi flow with other with high dignity, stature, respect, and listening, mutuality, nonconformity, elegance, trust, reflection back, that poetry, that eroticized ubuntification of shared space where we move together without even a central figure to the whole totality that we're in. I can't do it alone. That to me, as I close today, as I left the monastery after disrobing, the seeds of purification are within you. Nurture them with awareness, and you will continue to awaken. What more teaching do you need, Alan, as you leave the monastery? The Buddha's best friend, his cousin Ananda, was walking behind him one day and said, "Friend, it seems to me that that this life that we're living, this Dhamma life, a good friendship is at least half of what's required." And it said that the Buddha stopped and made heart, mind, psychic contact with his best friend Ananda. I try to imagine what it's like to be in the company of awakening like that, with such an epic dialogue, coming back to being seen isn't just seeing, it's like meeting, right? Can't do it alone. Thank you for sticking with me here. And so I'm imagining in rewilding intimacy, is what I'm saying, with the Buddha and Ananda, that half of the holy life, half of the Dhamma life, half of the life of awakening to freedom is awesome intimacy. Sensual, esoteric, existential, deeply respectful communion through the trans-filter of wisdom for the purpose of mutual and contextual liberation. Let's call our relationship by its true name. And the Buddha was said to Ananda, "No, Ananda, the totality of the Dhamma life is I don't know the original words, Kalyanamitta was used, noble friendship." Each of us have maybe one, if we're lucky, for a period of time. Sometimes two, and maybe there's lots of others, like 3, 5, 10, 15, who knows? I don't know many people that have really those intimates that really, really know how you deny your dreams, your subconscious, what you talk about in the fantasies of your deception, in the brothels of your hope, in the caverns of your passions. But wow, what a beautiful thing it is to have someone who's willing to meet you, as the Buddha was here to Ananda. The whole of this transformational awakening process is connected to I can't do it alone, and it can only be done in the context of radically significant otherness, Sangha. That to me is so powerful. When I look back at my life here coming to the end of this talk, is these people, that the constellation of my transformational awakening is so paramount for me. These people, even the people whom, yes, all people, I wanted to say those whom there's estrangement with, those whom have vilified, those whom you have heard have vilified you, so-called enemies, those who speak ill of you, and those who celebrate you, those who see you, that rare other one. How available are you to be seen? How available are you to see other? And how courageous can you be to care for self and other at that confluence of significant otherness, to elevate the most important qualities imaginable? Anicca, anatta, and dukkha, panya and nibbana, the 5 portals of how I practice my Dhamma in my life. I'll speak about them next week when we continue this how do you live the Dhamma, Dhamma sanity, creativity, aesthetics, and the simple expression of how well do you care for freedom. And the soul of that, the heart of that, the wisdom of that is dignity, which is the essence of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All beings are born equal in dignity and in rights. The essence of those articles of freedom that have been enshrined by women and men as the guiding principles of democracy and decency and our human expression to confront authoritarianism and dictatorship on this planet. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for going along on this journey with me, and have a beautiful week. And I hope to see you next Sunday at this time here from Blessed Ubud. Thank you.